Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Journey Podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Avila. On today's episode, we have podcaster Ralph Sutton joining us to talk about his career in podcasting. And he has two successful podcasts out right now, the Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll Show and the Good Sugar Podcast. You can find him at iamralphsutton.com or any social media as I Am Ralph Sutton, and you can find his podcasts anywhere you find podcasts. In today's episode, we explore his exciting career changes. He started as a nightclub promoter and then eventually finding his home in radio, which then transitioned into podcasting. And what I love most about this episode is we really talk a lot about how to mold your passion with what you're good at to find what type of career you want to get into. And then from there, how to actually jump into it. So he offers a lot of great advice on how to make that leap or how to make a situation where maybe an opportunity isn't available and how to make your own opportunities and get into that career anyways. And so please enjoy Ralph Sutton. Hey everyone, welcome to the Career Journey Podcast, where we explore exciting careers and how to get them from the people who've lived it. I'm your host, Dr. Brittany Avila. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy. Well, if there's no questions, we can get started. So I usually just start with from the beginning. Did you have any inkling or any idea of what you wanted to be when you were a child?
What's funny is that I always kind of knew I wanted to be in some sort of field of entertainment. Even as a kid, like I said, I wrote letters to Letterman and stuff like a couple of times, even though it went nowhere. But I did radio in college, even though I didn't ever think about doing radio at the time. But I've always had like a deep voice, as you might hear, and had always been told, "Oh, you should get into radio. You have such a good voice." And I graduated college with a communication and business degree, which is what I'm doing now. And it sounds like, oh my, you really planned for this. But no, in my third year of college where you have to choose your major, I just looked with a guidance counselor, what are the least amount of new classes I have to take to get whatever the easiest degree was. And it was communications and business. So that's what I did. It wasn't a thought process, but in the background, it was always something I loved the idea of doing, you know. I did two radio shifts in college radio, and when I realized I didn't get to pick the music, I was like, well, this is not for me. And I just stopped. I was a nightclub promoter for years, so I was always working in some form of entertainment. So I would say that was, you know, I mean, although I'm 50, well, just turned 51 on New Year's Eve. So I have...
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And I'm a twin, which is weird. I have a twin brother who was actually born January 1st, and I was born New Year's Eve. We're 4 minutes apart. And because I was born in 69, we're actually born in different decades. I was born in the 60s. He was born in the 70s. It's kind of a strange thing that those 4 minutes made that big of a difference.
Right. That's cool.
But yeah, so I went to cooking school and I ran a restaurant for a bunch of years. I was a strip club DJ for a bunch of years. And I was a tech guy for a while for restaurants, like helping do tech support, nightclub promoter, as I said. And then eventually what happened was at the strip club I was DJing at, a radio guy had started there on part-time, and I just recognized immediately that he had mic skills that I could tell, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. I just could tell. Been working in the business long enough. And he got me a job, an audition at a radio station. And that's how I started getting officially into the world of entertainment. I was 29 at the time. 28.
Wow.
28. Yeah.
Okay. So a lot seemed to happen kind of between majoring in communications and business in college to getting kind of to where you are now. So what was that first step? What did you do right out of college or maybe even during college?
Right. I was a nightclub promoter. So what happened was when I was, I'm at the time, you know, as I said, I'm 51. When I was 18 in New York City, the laws had only changed 2 years prior to be, you had to be 21 to drink. It happened in 86. I was 16 at the time. But what they did in New York was for 10 years, they allowed clubs to be 18 to enter, 21 to drink, because it was just to get used to that new loss of revenue stream. So I went to clubs, and there were a lot of like underage clubs and stuff where you had to be under 21 to get in. And I went to a club and there was nobody there. It was at this legendary nightclub here in New York called the Palladium, and it is a no more these days. But they had a back room that was for underage people, and I looked around the room. There was nobody there. I was 18, and I was like, I know more people that are in this club right now. So the next day, I called the club under the pretend name of being a club promoter. I was not a club promoter. I just called and said, "Hey, I was at your club last night. Great club. Nobody was there. I could definitely bring more people." And he said, "Well, what's the name of your club?" And I looked down on my shirt, and I was wearing a T-shirt that said "Monkey Business Crew," and that was from. You're too young to know this, but there was this big Gary Hart, Donna Rice. He was a presidential candidate in the early '80s, and they were caught having sex, and it was on a boat called the Monkey Business, and at a place in Florida, they sold T-shirts that said the Monkey Business Crew, as in the people that worked on that boat. And so I just happened to have that T-shirt. I think my dad even. I mean, I wasn't political at 18. Just my dad got me that T-shirt.
Right.
So I said, "Oh, we're called Monkey Business Crew," and then I got a job at the biggest nightclub in New York as a nightclub promoter, and did that for a bunch of years from 18 to like 23. I was first nightclubs and then rock clubs. And because I fell more in love with rock music around 22, 23, and worked at the biggest rock club in the country called Limelight, which was a rock club inside of a church, which is in New York City. The church is still there, but it's not a club anymore. They actually made two movies about the place, one called Party Monster with Macaulay Culkin and a documentary called Limelight. But anyway, I did that. And then rock industry changed in like 1991, 92, when Nirvana came out and Pearl Jam came out. It started to descend the popularity of rock clubs. Rock clubs in the late 80s, early 90s with Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue and all these fun rock bands. It was let's go out, get drunk, and get laid. And then it was Nirvana, Pearl Jam. Like, even though I loved the music, it was more stay at home and be depressed kind of music. So
different vibe, yeah.
Very different vibe. And all the rock clubs started closing. And I found myself going to be out of a job very soon, right? I knew the writing was on the wall. And all the strippers within a 50-mile radius of Limelight would come to Limelight on rock night because they knew somebody famous would be there, right? It just was the way it was, right? So I knew all the strip club DJs, all the strippers, and all the managers. And I just got a job at 22 or 23, something like that, as a strip club DJ. And I did that for a bunch of years. It was great money. Hated it, but it was great money. And then went to restaurant school at some point, got a job in the restaurant industry, was running a restaurant. Didn't love that either. Knew that I just was not happy. I was trying to figure out what to do. And I was doing both at the same time. I was working at the strip club and working at the restaurant, which was, I mean, when I think about probably working 90 hours a week at one point. It was nuts. I'd work overnights. I'd work for, I would work like, 4 or 5 days a week at the restaurant, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday night at a strip club till 5 a.m. It was crazy. And then when I met that DJ at the strip club, he got me an audition at the station that was an hour and a half drive from my house. They gave me the midnight to 6 a.m. shift on Saturdays to Sunday, and I would do that for, I think it was $7 or $8 an hour at the time. And then I would drive straight to the restaurant after my 6 o'clock in the morning shift and start my 8 in the morning shift at the restaurant. It was horrible, right? But I knew I wanted to get into radio. So I said, I'm just going to do it. I'll deal with it. And then 3 or 4 months, at that point, I was 28. So, I did strip club DJing for a bunch of years, did the restaurant for 3-4 years together, and then got that audition at 28. And by the end of that, like 3 or 4 months, I pitched the idea of me doing a radio show. I just said, I think this would be cool. No one's playing the music that I was playing in rock clubs almost 10 years earlier now of Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, Van Halen. Nobody was doing that, right? So I pitched this idea for a show. They gave me 10 to midnight on Sundays. We went number one in our market, and then I got us on the number one station in Jersey. And then that led to me at 29, 30 having a nationally syndicated rock radio show that I was the owner of, the programmer of, the interviewer of, and we were on in its prime 95 stations. And that's what I did most of my adult life, which then, I don't mean to be cliff noting this so much, and you could always ask me more questions as we go, but about 6 years ago, I realized, radio is fucking, excuse my language, dying.
Yeah.
And nobody cares anymore about radio. Where it used to be when I said I did radio, people were like, oh my goodness, radio? Wow, you are a celebrity. But fast forward 10, 12 years later, nobody cares because it's iTunes, it's podcasting, it's YouTube. So I decided 6 years ago to start a podcast, and I did them both, the radio show and the podcast, for about a year to try and transfer the audience over to the podcast. Though in hindsight, I realized if you were still listening to radio in 2014, you probably don't know what a podcast is, right? So very few people moved over. But that led to me starting the show. The show did really well, launched a network. The network did pretty well. And now I have a network of about 22 shows. We get about 5 million listeners a week, give or take, on the network. We have studios here in New York, and we're thinking about maybe opening studios in LA once this chaos is over. But it's an amazing amalgam of, I tell people all the time, most people change careers every 6-7 years anyway, unless you're in your field, which takes so much time to get to.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't think that people leave the doctoring world that much because it took too long to get there.
Yeah, we even have like a term for it. It's called alt-ac, so alternative to academia, if you leave teaching, because it happens so rarely and it's kind of seen as taboo in a little way. There's a whole culture around
I imagine it would be, because it takes so long to get there. It's like, what were you doing? You wasted 10 years or whatever it is to get to that point and then leave. It's kind of weird.
It's becoming more frequent now that there's more industries and companies that are willing to hire researchers, because that's what we're really good at, because that's what they train us for. And so it's becoming a little bit more common than it had in the past. But yeah, we tend to stay if we can, but they're also paying us less than they used to.
Well, that's the thing. It used to mean that if you had a DR before your name, it meant that you made money. It doesn't necessarily mean that anymore. Same thing with lawyers.
Yeah.
Used to be lawyers, you just meant you were wealthy, and that's definitely not the case anymore.
No. Yeah, that's what I try to tell students too, is that you can make more money doing a lot of different things. Like my common one that I tell students is that my brother works in pest control, never went to college, and he makes more money than I do. So
wow, that's crazy.
Having a PhD does not automatically indicate money.
Yeah, even I think the thought of college in general, I feel, unless you're going, like, I don't have kids, but if I had kids, unless you're going for a specific path, it would probably behoove you to work in the real world for a couple of years and then decide if you want to go to college, because it just doesn't make sense. I went for the wrong reasons. There was weeks where I didn't go to any classes. I was just enjoying myself because I had no direction.
Students still do that.
I was the first kid in my whole family, no matter how far you want to go, married, family, whatever, to go to college. So it just made no sense. Nobody cared in my family.
Yeah, and there's a lot more of that now. A lot of students we call them first generation, where they're the first in their family to go. The hard part now is that I think we've kind of started in this culture where we tell students from a very young age that without college, they can't get a job, because the job market is incredibly competitive now, and it's different, and it's forming and shaping. And a lot of careers kind of demand that you have that college degree, even when they don't really need it.
I think if you're going into a corporate environment or any sort of academic environment, sure. Yeah. But I think for most people, like in my life, I've had a dozen jobs. Never once has anyone said, "Did you go?" Even ask me if you went to college,
right?
Because then it doesn't matter. I think these days where I think in the gig economy that we live in, that it's probably going to just be more and more gig oriented as we get it gets more pervasive. Who the hell cares? As long as you have good reviews on the app, who cares?
And I think it's moving that direction. We just had this weird time frame where parents were telling students they had to go.
Right.
Companies, like even my mom started her own travel agency when I was really young, and she never went to college either. But now when she's hiring people, she's like, well, I look for college degrees because I know that they can use like Word and Excel. And I'm like, so if they could just show you they could use that, would they need the degree? So I think there was this movement where a lot of companies were kind of demanding it. But
right.
I mean, the job market's just shaping so much now that you can kind of create what you want to do. Like you said multiple times in your story that you kind of just wiggled your way in there. You just kind of went out
to the school of Google and YouTube and figured out everything. I do that all the time. Like I tell my staff all the time that whatever problem you're encountering, not only did 1,000 other people have it, but someone put up a YouTube tutorial on how to fix it.
That's
So
exactly what I tell students too.
there's always going to be an answer. Like, so when
Yeah.
I built my studio, it used to be here in my home, this room that you're looking at right now. And when we decided we're doing this, I was like, well, I need to build an HD multi-camera studio to make it look right. And this is 6 years ago now. And I was told by a bunch of people that I knew that worked in the video space. I was also a VJ on VH1 for a while, and I host a bunch of music events and stuff with big video production people. So I was asking them, like, what do I need? And everyone said, oh, it's at least $50,000 to $100,000 if you want to do that. And I said, is it though? Like, I feel that's probably the old school way of thinking about it, you know? And
Right.
I found, and I'm a tech, like I build my own computers. I've learned that online. I just like to do techie things, right? So I found this Japanese or some Asian-y plug-in for a computer. And because it only came with, I think it was Chinese or Japanese instructions, there was no English when it came. So I was using the Google Translate on my phone to get the links to where to download the drivers and figure out how to install it. And I installed this thing that cost me $600, which was the equivalent of what's called a TriCaster. That's $12,000 at the time. And I got it working, a multi-camera studio for $700. And it just came from researching online and using Google Translate.
Right. And I find going remote kind of did that for us in my industry, where we had to start making videos, and a lot of us are trying to make higher quality ones. And so we all went out and bought like the ring lights and the green screens. And at first they were ridiculously expensive, but now I think because there's so much more demand and it's out there, they've gotten a little bit cheaper. But
yeah, you know, what's funny is that at the time, again, we wanted a green screen. And like a regular green screen was like, let's say a couple $100. I don't know exactly what. But to get a retractable green screen, because they didn't want it to be down all the time, I didn't want to have to set it up every time. They were like $700-800 for like this special. I'm like, there's got to be a better way. So I went to a regular blind store, you know, like where you get like cheap retractable blinds. And then I just spray painted it green and then hung it. And for $80, I had a great green screen. And it's just like just thinking differently.
I saw somebody the other day on like TikTok, of all things, just took like a green t-shirt and like made a small green screen that they could put.
It's all about the amount of space you want to incorporate into your video. If it's just going to be a tight image, it's very easy. When it's a big space, like 2 people or whatever, then you need to think a little bit more, you know, creatively.
Yeah.
You could probably even get a big piece of like green oak tag, you know, and just hang it behind you. It would probably work.
Yeah. I mean, now too, even with Zoom creating backgrounds for you, all you really need is a blank wall.
Yeah, it's still not great though. I'd say it's about 65% there. You know, it's great to see. Even like, you know, I tell my staff all the time, like everything I've done for our studios, I figured out. But it was 5-6 years ago. I am sure there's better ways to do everything now. So we need to figure those things out. But now it's on them. Like when they're telling me that, like the new thing now, which I don't know if you do this with your show, but is to put up clips that have, you know, closed captioning on the bottom, to have, you know, the words show up, right? And there is no great software solution yet, because even at 95% accurate, when the average person speaks about 200-300 words every minute or whatever it is, that's a lot of words you have to go in and fix. And then if there's 2 people talking, it definitely doesn't work. So you're going to go in and fix it. And they were doing it manually, and I found some program that does it and like tries its best to separate the 2 voices, and you just go in and edit it. And it's like, why am I showing you this? I'm 50. You guys are the ones that should be showing me these things. But you know, it's just a matter of wanting to go look for those things. Go look for the next thing.
Well, and you were saying that you can pretty much just use Google and search for things. That's how I started this podcast. I had no idea how to start a podcast. Like, it's not anywhere in my wheelhouse. I did not do anything with communications or want to be in radio. I just wanted students to hear stories. And I just Googled everything. There was so much out there on how to start one and what to do that
it's amazing. And also now there's so much easier ways to do it. When I started 6 years ago, I felt I was coming on board late, you know, because at that time it was probably, I don't know, 7 years old at that time, you know, and there was at the time, I remember them saying, oh my God, there's 100,000 podcasts. Now there's 1 million podcasts, right? But the Reddit subgroup for the subreddit called podcasts had like 5,000 members. I'm like, oh my God, 5,000? Now there's 500,000, right? Which is
Right.
amazing, that exponential growth. But to go from knowing nothing, last year I was on the front of entrepreneur.com on how to start a podcast. They asked me, which I think is hilarious, that I'm all the person that knows when I knew nothing. Yeah, I shouldn't be your guide, your guru, so to speak, because now the barrier to entry is so low with things like Anchor and even Squadcast and stuff like that. They make it so easy. You don't even need to know how to set up an RSS feed. You don't need
Nope.
to know how to equalize audio or whatever. It's just done for you.
Yep.
It's
Even
crazy.
editing is easy now. There's software that basically makes it, I mean, easy enough for me to do it, and I'm not a sound engineer by any means.
Yeah.
Um,
The next level I saw that's fascinating to me, if it actually starts to work, is where you can type what you'd want someone to say, and it uses the audio that's already there to, like, let's say a word got cut off or you didn't hear them clearly or whatever. You can go in and change what they said by typing it,
oh, wow.
and then the audio fixes itself. I've seen like clips of that already. It's very early on, but that's just crazy, because then there's a whole other problem with, did people really say these things?
Right? That's what I was saying. That's scary, kind of like,
Deep fakes already exist with video. Deep fakes
right?
are very common.
Oh my gosh. See, and I get it from the podcasting. I have had audio where it was not great and I wanted to be able to like just fix it. So I get that, but it definitely sounds very scary to just change somebody's voice and you can make them say whatever
Yeah, whatever you want. It's pretty wild. I mean, we are just a couple years away from that being pretty easy to do. I mean, now there's
Yeah.
a program I use on my phone all the time called Reface. Have you ever saw that, where it just takes your face and puts it on different videos? It puts it on Britney Spears or on Justin Bieber, and then
Yeah.
I just put their videos. It makes me laugh, and it sort of looks like you, not 100%, but you just click a button and it's done in 30 seconds, which is
Yeah.
it's crazy that that's where we're at already.
Well, I remember the deep fakes coming out and like they had that one video from Barack Obama that like he said stuff and people were really believing it. And
Yeah,
like,
none of it was true. Yeah, it's the crazy thing. It's the crazy world we live in right now, and it's
yeah.
just going to get worse. But especially with nobody having the ability to actually fact check anything anymore, they just, if it has a cute meme associated with it, it must be true.
Well, and that's where I think college is actually a good idea to help people figure out if we do anything in college teaching, it's that I want people to be able to find sources, think critically, right, and not just accept everything that we say.
On my podcast a couple of months ago, we had Neil deGrasse Tyson on, who I love. I don't know if you know. And we talked, by the way, my show, I do two podcasts. One is called Good Sugar, which is like a health and wellness show. And the other one's called Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. And he was on that show. And my first question to him was, why the hell would you come on a show called Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll? Like I know who you are. Like, I read your books. Like, why would you do this? And his answer was that he normally goes on science shows, and those people are already on his team. He likes to go on shows where, but he spent a lot of time discussing how he hates the way students are taught, because they're taught facts. They're not taught how to find the truth. And 100%. I think that's a big flaw in our system, right? I believe that's probably true.
Yeah, and there's a lot of us working to counter that. One of the biggest problems is students have gotten really used to being taught facts and regurgitating them. So they're very used to being lectured at and then memorizing, performing on a test, going off, forgetting everything. That's what's easy to them. And when you change that model, like in my courses, I don't have a test in any of my courses. I don't actually make them memorize. I do it kind of differently. And when you force them to do it, it's a little bit harder. It takes a little bit more brain power, and they are very resistant at first. And so we kind of come up against that, and then against, the administration that likes doing things the way it's been
especially
done for hundreds of years.
They're college students and they're 18 now, 19 now, they have 12 years of different way of teaching them, that it just comes up weird. It must be hard for them to just all of a sudden, have to look at things differently.
Yeah. They always say that they feel like they're teaching themselves. They don't feel like they're really learning, because that's what they're used to, even though we know, there's tons of research out there that shows that being lectured at and memorizing on an exam is like the worst way to learn.
You forget immediately, for sure.
Yeah. So there's a few of us out there. It's a pretty big number that are trying to change the way we teach to teach them those exact things, how to find information, how to evaluate information, how to think for themselves, how to challenge, how to question. But it's not really how
It's
our
unfortunate. Like the last
school
couple of
system is
years
set
of
up.
lifetime have taught us anything is that people have a really bad ability to discern fact from fiction, and
Mhm.
it's just going to get worse as these technologies improve. Like
Yeah.
the amount of times I've been sent links when I was like, dude, that's actually an advertisement. Like that's not what you sent me. The link to is not an actual credible news source of because I get into debates a lot about stuff like that. You know,
I laugh. I'll get like family members that post like stuff from The Onion as real, and
it happened so many times.
I'm like, do you even know what The Onion is? Like, did you look at all? Like, Google before you post it? Oh,
It's really amazing. It's a sad. It's I mean the amount of misinformation out there is only going to grow, exponentially because it's so easy. Just like to pull it full circle to the podcast world, it's so much easier now to do a podcast. So like when I was starting, you had to say like, oh, okay, I am going to spend a month learning this, and I really know I want to do this. Where now I like that it's easier because anybody can start it. Anybody can just start a podcast. But that's why of the million podcasts that are in iTunes, I think 35 or 40% of them are dead. They're still categorized and there's still an RSS feed that may be playing the audio, but there hasn't been a new episode in a year.
yeah,
People just abandon their podcasts because they lose interest because it is so easy to start. And then when you see that, I think it's 90% of podcasts have less than 500 listeners. So
right.
you're never going to be able to monetize 500 listeners. So people give up. So it requires not only diligence and consistency, but to last long enough to where you get past those people that have those growth issues that eventually you'll hopefully find an audience.
I remember the magic number when I was starting mine was like 7. They were saying a lot of podcasts don't get past 7 episodes.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
and we were talking about the website that kind of links podcasters with people that want to be interviewed on podcasts that we used to meet each other. They didn't allow me to post until I had at least 10 episodes because I
that's
think they're
cool.
trying to make sure that it's not that case where it's just somebody starting and then
Right, because it happens so much. Yeah, it's amazing because it's so easy. You don't even have to spend money anymore. It used to be you had to at least spend the $10 a month to host your audio. But now there's so many that do free audio if they get to steal your advertising, or put in ads in your content. So they don't charge you anything. It's amazing. So there is no commitment other than the however many minutes your podcast is. Yours I seem tend to be about an hour, but some are 10 minutes, some are 3 hours. But if that's all, I tell everybody when you start a podcast, you're going to hate the first 5 episodes, no matter what. So just record them, listen back to them. If you can't listen to your own podcast, nobody's going to listen to it. So then just start over because it doesn't matter. There's no, when I was doing radio was wild because radio lived once. It was live. We had no delay at the time, which was nerve wracking, but there's no archives. So whatever was said happened and then it didn't happen again. With a podcast, I have people coming up to me about things that I said 3 years ago. I'm like, I don't remember what I said 4 years ago. How am I supposed to? I don't remember what I had for breakfast 2 days ago.
I want to go back a little bit. In your story, there was a lot of entertainment work. And then all of a sudden you kind of transitioned and did that restaurant experience for like just a little bit. What went into the decision to try that?
I was miserable. This is before radio started. I was miserable at the strip club, right? When I was working in the beginning in the strip club industry, about 22, 23, the money was idiotically good. Like I'm talking $3,000 a night sometimes in cash, right? To just push buttons and say stupid shit on a microphone. It was crazy. And be surrounded by gorgeous girls and be a hormone-filled 22-year-old boy. It seemed like heaven in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
But fast forward a few years later, when you realize how miserable everybody was, how many people had drug problems, alcohol problems, emotional problems, even the clientele and the people that work there. Like, I remember once a girl said to me, I never want to get married. I said, why? She goes, well, every guy here is miserable and married. I said, yeah, well, your sample size is skewed because you're only searching here. they're here because they're miserable in their marriage. It's you're not looking at a fair sample, right? Anyway,
Right.
so I went from making thousands, fast forward maybe 8 years later, I was making hundreds, right? It just, the industry changed, more strip clubs opened. It became much more competitive, a lot less people going to each one. And I started realizing, oh, I could make this money anywhere else. And I don't want to be a 40-year-old strip club DJ. I just didn't want to be that guy. At the time I was 31 or something, or no, it's probably no, I was probably 26 or 27 at the time. And then my father owned a restaurant, and their other owner, he owned a small piece of it, but the main owner, I'd go there a lot because I got to eat free, and I never, when I was a kid, so why not go there and be treated like a king? And
Right.
I became friends with the actual owner. My dad was a percentage, investor, but his manager quit, and I was there having dinner one day. He's like, "Look, the manager quit. I know I can trust you. Would you want to work here?" And I said, "I don't know anything about the restaurant industry." He goes, "Well, we could teach you." So then what I did was, for a year, I worked in every position, where I was a busboy, a waiter. I went to cooking school and learned how to cook. I wanted to know every single facet of the industry so that no person on that team could ever tell me, "You don't understand my job." I was like, no, I may not be the best bartender, but I can bartend if you don't show up. I may not be the best line cook, but I can be on the line if someone doesn't show up, right? So I felt, to me, that's what made a good manager. And I was so miserable at the strip club, it just seemed like, why not? At the time I was like 27, 26, something like that. And I was like, what do I have to lose? Not married, I don't have any kids. Let me just try and do this. And I knew that the money, even at $500 a night at the time at the strip club, was still more than I'd make, maybe I made that in a week at the restaurant, but at least it was something respectable. I was embarrassed telling people, "What do you do for a living?" "I'm a strip club DJ." I was like, ugh, they just seemed ridiculous. So that's why I started working in restaurants, and I'm good at it, but I don't enjoy it. So there's a few years ago, to help a friend out, he launched this raw organic juice company called Juice Press here in New York. At the time, he had 2 locations, and he just asked me if I had some part-time to help him out, because he knew I had a background in that industry. And I helped him build it to 35 locations. Now it has 90. He sold it last year. It's a $100 million company now, which is crazy. But I worked there for like a year or two part-time to just help them. I understand food and that industry well. I just don't like doing it. I just realized that it didn't make me happy. So when the opportunity started to work at radio, I jumped at that opportunity because I had a feeling that that was something I always wanted to explore.
Well, I think there's a good distinction there between something that you're good at and something that you want to do.
Right.
I feel like a lot of times we learn to gravitate towards what we're already good at. As children, that's what's reinforced all the time, right? Oh, you're good at playing basketball. Let's keep doing that. Or you're good at singing. Let's keep doing that. And so there's always this idea of kind of going for what you're good at versus what you want to do.
But I can argue both sides of that. I can argue both sides of that. People say follow your passion, but if you suck at your passion, what's the point? Like, if I know I wish I could sing, I'm never going to be a good singer, right?
Right.
So that would have been a really poor career choice for me, because I would never be a good singer. I felt I could do radio. I just had no background in it, But I feel that people too often confuse that. It's great. Like, now I realize, to be able to do what I love and make money at it is very rare. It's not something that happens often, right? So most people, it's that idea of live to work or work to live. Which one are you doing? I feel I'm doing both in a way. Like, I get to, my favorite time every week is doing my show. Nothing's happier for me than those 3 hours a week I'm recording my show. Then, the reality of running a network with 22 other shows, and there's probably 85 people that work at the company that I have to deal with, and that gets frustrating. But the actual act of just doing my show, nothing makes me happier every week. And I don't know which one's better. I know I could argue, like, my brother does what he does for a living so that he can enjoy himself when he's not working. Yeah. Some people are okay with that. It's like, you need to figure out what's more important to you. Like, if someone told you, oh, you can make $500,000 a year doing something you hate, or $200,000 a year doing something you love, Some people would choose choice A, some people would choose choice B. I don't know where your head is at. I would choose the 200,000 because I want to love what I do. I'm sure most people would choose the 500,000.
Yeah, and I live in a household where me and my husband did the opposite. So he chose his career in order to make money and live his life. He makes significantly more than I do because I chose the other option. And it's weird having a household with two people that chose the different option too, because we don't really understand each other's careers in a certain way. Because he's like, well, yours is like more like a hobby because you like to do it. It's different. It's weird. It's flexible. He doesn't understand. And then I don't understand his, where I'm like, why would you want to sit there and make calls all day long when you don't want to?
Well, because also some people, again, we'll use my brother as an example, doesn't have a passion. There is nothing in the career world that he's passionate about. He's more, he just doesn't, his passion is when he's not working because he never found something that's like, oh, I really need to do this. Like I'm doing an interview later today with a comic that I love, and I'm super excited about now the rest of this day researching him and seeing what he does for a living and coming up with unique questions and really trying to figure out, oh, where am I going to take this interview tonight? That is exciting to me. I love doing that. When we get a golden moment, like we had Ray Romano on, right? Who I love. You might be too young to know who he is, but he was a big comedian and TV show host, right? TV had a show called Everybody Loves Raymond. And we end our show every week on SDR we ask people their first experience with all three. First concert you went to, first drug you ever did, first time you had sex, right? We just ask that to everyone at the end of every interview. And he tells the first two when he gets to sex, he's like, I've never told the story. I shouldn't tell the story. And he goes, okay, screw it, I'll tell the story. And he tells the story. And to have him like question, should I tell this story? And then saying, all right, he felt comfortable enough. He's probably 60 something to have never told the story in a public forum. And then telling it is, to me, that's gold. I love things like that to happen.
Yeah. Well, and I think, so my generation, we were the ones that grew up with our parents always telling us to find our passion. Be anything that you want to be. Like, make sure you do what you love. I think that's kind of worked to a negative advantage for some because, again, like you're saying, there are different options. You can work to live. And kind of have that passion for your life as opposed to your work. And I feel like for at least my generation and the one below me, we didn't really feel like that was an option. Like we had to follow passions. And so it gets kind of complicated in figuring out what you want to do, what you're passionate about, and how to kind of meld those two sometimes.
And then you see kids like on TikTok making $8 million a year and you want to blow your brains out. I mean, I like when I look at a lifetime, because I've been doing now interviewing people and doing entertainment in one way, shape, or form for 20 something years, right? And then I watch these Instagrammers just do dances and get 9 million views. It breaks my heart. It's like, wow, imagine, why didn't I just learn how to dance? Like it changes your views on the world. Or people that like, YouTubers that are just commenting on other people doing things, and those get more views than the people that did those things. It's crazy, and it's a different generation. It's a different time. And, I'm sure that like, I just listened to this, I listen to books when I run, and I was listening to this book called Laugh Lines. I don't know the guy, but I give it a plug. His name is Alan Zweibel, and it's just a great book. And he talked about what it was like. He's a comedy writer. He started out writing for old school, like Borscht Belt, old school comics, like Shecky Green kind of old school comics in the 60s, and then morphing into learning how to write for people like Billy Crystal. And on SNL, he was a founding writer on SNL, and how as he got older, he had to learn different paths of how to write for that next generation of comics. And it's just about looking at it, it's like, oh, it's just a different world now, and either you go with it or you carve your own path. It's going to be one or the other, or you become a dinosaur. It's one of those three options.
Yeah, I've definitely heard, especially in the world of comedy, I think it's much more pronounced because you're front and center on what is kind of popular at that moment, or what
I think entertainment in general, whether it's music or even, podcasting. When I started podcasting, someone offered to do a show with me. My co-host said, let's do a podcast together. And I said, dude, podcasting is for people that can't do radio. I'm doing radio, so thank you, but no thank you. And then a year later, I said, dude, if you're still interested, I'll do it, because I'd started reading all about how popular podcasts had become. And it's just a matter of me realizing radio's dying. I gotta change, or I become a dinosaur. And I have several friends that are still doing radio. And now, instead of doing one job, they're like the music director, the program director, the morning show host, he does some ad sales, like, because they have so much less money in radio, they've gotten rid of people and just gave the people left 12 jobs instead of having the one job. And they're all miserable and they hate it. But they never thought, even now, I'm miserable and I'm not making money. It'd be one thing if it's like, I'm miserable and I'm surviving. But if it's I'm miserable and I'm not making money, like, then why are you still doing it? Figure something else out. Let's start exploring other options.
Well, and I think that happens in more than just entertainment industry too. I mean, everybody has to kind of mold and change. Like you think of, I mean, I guess this is entertainment too, but you think of how Blockbuster died because it wasn't willing to get into the like online market, like Netflix. Like they weren't willing to kind of send videos out or start the online market, and they died. And
I think MTV missed the world because they should have been Facebook. It's crazy that they didn't even try to be Facebook.
Yeah. Or even YouTube. Just in academia, in my career right now, everything's shifting because people were so against like online learning, teaching online. Right. Nobody wanted to do it. They thought it was terrible. It's not as good. And now all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, if you had already taught online before kind of you went remote, all of a sudden you were the one that people were seeking out. And so like everything kind of changes sometimes. And I think being adaptable and creative and kind of thinking about new ways to do things is probably the best.
I mean, a great example would be even the fact that there's all these gyms in the world with multi-millions of dollars, if not billions, and none of them saw the Peloton market coming. None of them decided we have thousands of unused equipment that we could just lease to people and create an app themselves. Like, why I know there's an Equinox app, and a couple of the other gyms have had apps, but none of them thought about the 1-2 punch of putting the technology with the equipment. They all had access to it already. They could have. The fact that it's a Peloton bike and not an Equinox bike is hilarious to me.
Yeah. Oh, I never thought of it that way. I definitely thought of that when everything switched remote and gyms had a hard time getting into that sphere of like doing it online or doing it through an app. But I was like, there's been app-based workouts and online-based workouts. I mean, P90X used to like send you videotapes. Like,
yeah, of course. I had the founder of P90X on my health and wellness show. Super interesting dude, billionaire. He sold it, and now he has this thing called Better Air, which is a room ionizer. It's supposed to be good to, like, instead of killing bacteria, it replaces bad microorganisms with good microorganisms. And I don't know, it was a whole thing. He sent me one. I use it. I don't know if it does anything, but it's in my house.
Interesting.
We get a lot of free things here, which is funny. Like I said, one day I don't have it anymore, but I woke up on a Casper mattress. I was eating my Blue Apron food. Like, everything was, I had this coffee that was free. It's like, wow, I haven't paid for anything this month. It's really, really weird. But it's one of the perks of having a somewhat successful podcast is they send you free stuff all the time.
I always notice that trend. The more money you make, the more free stuff you get.
Yeah, I have a friend that's a very famous, well, I wouldn't say very famous, but a pretty famous actress. And I remember it was at her house in LA, and her place was just filled with like iPhones and beautiful bags. And she didn't use any of it. They just send it to her in the hopes of her using it. It was crazy. If those people were good people, they would give it to the homeless, for God's sakes.
Well, I usually just wrap up with kind of major advice that you would normally give somebody starting out, either in your industry or even anywhere.
I will tell you my philosophy in life, which is when anyone says to me, I'm thinking about starting a podcast, or every girl I've been on a date with in the last 5 years, it's like, oh my God, my life would be such a good podcast. I hear that shit all the time, right? Me and my girlfriends tell the funniest stories to each other, whatever the hell it is, right? My answer immediately is, do it. Why are you not doing it? Like, just do it. And like, what do you mean? Like, it's so easy to start now. And that's with everything. Really, whatever industry you're in, there is a first step. There's a term, a girl I had on my show, it's really, the old term would be baby steps, but she says micro changes is how she used it. But that's how I look at it. And by the way, it's funny, like, I really believe in that. The smallest changes can make a big difference, right? So
Yeah.
whatever your step towards whatever goal that is, whatever it's getting in shape or getting a new job or whatever, take the first step. You know, if you are fat and you want to lose weight and currently doing no push-ups, start with one. Like do one push-up a week and then start adding more to that. It's funny. In fact, I had gained a lot of weight a couple of years ago and I lost so far about 30 pounds. I got to lose a little bit more. But I put this book out and it was in top 100 on Amazon for a bit. I'm going to hold it up. It's called The 100% Guaranteed Guide to Weight Loss and Fitness. It's an actual book you can buy on Amazon. Chapter 1 says eat less. Chapter 2 says work out more. And then the rest of the book is blank. And that's it. Because that's really all it is. You know, so the reason why I say that is it really is most things that you want to do start with an obvious first step. And if you want to be an influencer, you don't have an Instagram account, it's probably going to be hard for you. You know, so start with starting an Instagram account. You want to be a podcaster? Figure out how to start a podcast. Start recording it. If you're not able to get to that first step, you're never going to do it. And that's the part that amazes me of the disconnect where people, especially the millennial generation, no offense, they all the guys that work for me that are in their 20s and early 30s, they just think things should be given to them. Like, oh, I showed up for work today. Where's my podcast? Like, doesn't work that way. You got to, you know, either you start your own podcast, get it really big, and then you'll bring you to the network, where you're an intern, you're doing crap work. That's what you're here for, you know. And if you don't want to do that, go do your own thing. And I just think most people, for whatever reason, in any aspect of life, like I have a friend who has been single and not dating for like 10 years, if not more, right? And always complains. And I said, let me ask you a question. Are you on any of the dating apps? He's like, those are stupid. I'm like, well, if you're not on the dating apps, and we are in COVID times anyway, how do you expect to meet anybody? Like if you're not doing anything, you're just complaining. You're not doing anything to change your environment. You're just complaining. They say if you can't change your environment, change your perspective. And if you're not changing that, nothing's going to happen. And so my feeling with everything in life is just take that first baby step. As I said, I had gotten fat and I bought a pull-up bar knowing, I'm not going to be able to do a single pull-up because I'm out of shape. And I started with, let me just see if I can hold myself up for 10 seconds. And now to the point where I can do 10 pull-ups, right? So it took a while, but I got there again. I used to be in much better shape when I was younger, but you know, everything in life starts with baby steps or micro changes, and people just don't want to make those changes. And you either accept where you are or you start making a change, and that's it. That's my answer.
Well, I think sometimes people want to start too big, right? So with doing pull-ups, everybody wants to start with doing one pull-up.
Right.
But nobody starts by doing one pull-up. Like you said, I mean, everything online, all the fitness apps, they always tell you, okay, well, you got to start by like hanging there, get your strength in your hands, your wrists, or whatever. And so there's even smaller steps. And I think a lot of times people are wanting to do that bigger
100%.
step. Oh, I showed up to work. I should have a podcast now because this is what you go to work, you work, you get something. And we forget that there's like these little tiny steps along the way.
100%. Over the past 5 years of doing SDR show and then Gas Digital, which is my network and my other podcast, other industries for us have spawned from them, right? So for instance, when we opened our studios, we built 2 really nice studios, one big one small one. And I realized, okay, well, at the time we had 10 shows. They're all let's say 1 or 2 times a week. Let's just say 30 hours a week. The studios are taken. There's a lot of empty hours there that are not being used. So I created a website, nycpodcasting.com, for the SEO part of it. And now we're paying our rent in rentals, right? Which is a separate business, paying our rent in rentals. When we started also, I noticed a lot of podcasts didn't have merchandise. So we bought a little way to start printing stuff, and I started a merchandising company called podcastmerch.com, and then started selling merch for not just our podcast, but like 20 other podcasts that are not on my network, right? And so that's a separate company. Same thing with ad sales, because I came from radio. I knew ad sales. I knew how to work with the ad sales companies, and we started an ad sale company. And then now we sell ads for way bigger people. Like I sell for Barbara Corcoran. We sold for Mike Tyson. We sold for a lot of people. And then on Gas Digital, we have paid subscriptions. Thousands and thousands of paid subscribers, along with the free side that has ads in it. So you're making money on both sides, right? the amount of people that come in that meet with me that are looking to start all of that. Like, oh, I want to, pay,
I do
we
it
have
all.
do it all, our own web servers, our own this, and our own subscription. I think it was years of trial and error to get to where we were. We made so many mistakes. We almost went under 3 times. In the beginning of the pandemic, I had to fund the company in March because we lost every major advertiser, and then we were able to get out of it. Now I think we're doing stronger than ever. But it took years to do that. And everybody looks at it like you said, oh, I just want to be able to do 20 pull-ups. Like, well, start with holding yourself up for 30 seconds and we'll worry about down the road. And so
Yeah.
that's a really, it goes back to micro steps, micro changes, and just do things. Then you get a feeling of accomplishment if you did 10 small things, the little things that you do. And then the last thing that I say that I do every single day, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I write my to-do list down every day. I handwrite it. Again, I'm older, so if you're a typer, you grew up typing, maybe you don't make that mind to pen connection that I do. But every morning, the first thing I do is rip off the old to-do list and then put it in the order that I think I can get it done today. Some have been on there for quite some time, but at least they're on there, and I know that they're going to get done. So that little thing every morning is just a good routine to be in, whether it's on a Google Keep or a doc of some sort, or you're writing it down. I think it really helps you to figure out, and visualize your day. And then the last thing that I've been really getting into lately that I made fun of so much, but I started doing it on my health and wellness show, and I recommend it wholeheartedly, is I started at 1 minute and now I'm up to 5 minutes a day of meditation, where I turn off everything, my phone, my TV, my everything's off, and I just sit in silence and just focus on breathing for 5 minutes. I'd like to get up to more, but it's hard to do. You don't realize how hard it is to shut off your mind. But boy, the guy that said something that really hit with me is like, you're not going to notice the change, but you will notice when you stop.
Yeah.
And that's the way I really feel about it, is that it really, because a couple of days went by where I didn't do it, and I started realizing I had some, like, it's a very Jewy word for me, agita, like I was just stressed out. I'm like, oh, I stopped. Like, maybe I need to get back in. I started doing it again, and I felt a little happier, a little more in a good place again.
That's how I felt about working out when I first started exercising at like 24. I was very out of shape until then. And then once I got into the good groove, I would notice instantly, like my time management would go away, my good mood would go away, everything. And I realized it was something that needed to be kept up.
Right. It's crazy. It is amazing how much your personal wellness transfers into every other aspect of your life, and
Yeah.
I think that unfortunately people very often don't put themselves at the top of the list where they need to be.
Yeah.
I'm all, especially during the pandemic, that's all I've been doing. I focus, what are we doing? And especially if you live, fortunately I live in a place where we take it seriously. You may live in a place that doesn't. I don't know where you are, but so I do everything with much more mindfulness, much more in the moment, much more presence than I think I've ever done before. And I think that if anything good came out of these last 9-10 months, I think it's that. And hopefully those lessons will stay with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And coming from psychology background, there's a lot of research that backs up all of this advice if you're interested. But meditation, mindfulness has been shown to help everything from memory, cognitive ability, like intelligence, well-being. It helps pretty much everything they've ever looked at. Whether or not it helps, it does.
Yeah, I agree. I now I run about 20 miles a week, and I listen to educational podcasts when I run, because I feel I'm helping out my mind and my body at the same time. And I feel like anything you can do to further yourself, you should. I think too many people get comfortable in routine and don't strive for betterness. And you should always be striving for betterness.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, did you have any last things you wanted to say, or last?
I would say very simply, follow me everywhere at I am Ralph Sutton. I am Ralph Sutton. I'm a big advocate of the term I believe I coined, which is social symmetry. Find a name that works. There's a great website called NameCheck, but they leave out the second E. So it's NameCheck, and you can put in an idea and it'll show you across every platform if it's available or not. So you keep toying with it until you find something that works. Like I would have loved it if Ralph Sutton was available, but it wasn't. So I went with I Am Ralph Sutton. With my podcast, which is everywhere at the SDR show, I would have loved Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll to be available, but it wasn't. So I went with the SDR show. So you find things that make sense, but may not be your first choice. And then if you can get that across all platforms, nothing sounds worse than it's like, oh, follow me at Ralph_Sutton at Instagram, but I am Ralph 38 on Twitter. Like just figure something out that's going to be everywhere, and it makes and you should be everywhere that they look for you. But whether it's in your podcast, submit to every single platform. Don't just say, oh, I'm just going to be on iTunes. No, you should be on YouTube. You should be on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, because you can't control where the person that wants to listen is going to listen, and just submit to every platform. It costs nothing. So why wouldn't you?
I learned that just because I'm one of the few people in the world that don't own any Apple products. And so I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Right here. Here's my S20 right here.
Oh, yay. I don't have mine.
I have a PC. I build my own PCs, and I have an Android. I'm a hacker when I was a kid. I was wanted by the FBI for computer hacking when I was 15. They came to my house. It was scary as shit. But I didn't go to jail, thankfully. But I like the openness of Android and PCs. I don't like the closed system. I get why it works, and I think they're great if you don't want to think about it. It's great for that. It's just not for me.
Well, it was funny. I was watching a kids movie this weekend because I have 2 kids, and on it was this huge part of the plot is that the technology was like designed by children, and so they keep talking about how simple and easy it is and how it could be used by children. And I'm like, oh, so it's Apple.
I mean, I get it. Like, it's great for my mom. She's great on her iPad, and it's just great that she has that ability. So, and look, they work. They definitely work. That's the great thing about an iPhone. You open it up, you turn it on, and it works. But if you want to really delve into things or make things work how you want to work, then you can't use an iPhone. You have to use an Android.
Yeah, but not having any Apple products, I know pretty intimately that it has to be spread across multiple platforms because some of us can't use iTunes.
And now, hilariously, which I just heard a few months ago, iHeartRadio is now the #1 platform for podcasts, more so than iTunes, more so than Spotify. Somehow they creeped into the #1 position for most used for podcasts. I don't know how that happened, but apparently that's the case.
They were smart enough to adapt.
I don't know how they did it. I've never turned that app on at all. We were SDR was one of the first 1,000 podcasts to be picked for Spotify. When Spotify was a closed system, they only had 1,000 podcasts. That was a great time for us because if you had Spotify, one of those podcasts, you only had 1,000 options. That was it.
Right.
Now they opened up to everything. But Pandora now you can submit to as of about a year ago. So there's just no reason not to be everywhere.
Yeah. I use like some weird obscure podcast host because when I started listening to podcasts a long time ago, there wasn't anything on Spotify and I didn't have Apple. And so it was one that like pulled all of them out of Apple. And so it was the only place I could like listen to it.
Wait, for your hosting platform or for your listening platform?
For when I listen to it.
I use Google Podcasts now. I think it's a pretty good platform. Yeah, I like Google Podcasts. I used to use this one called Podcast Addict, but it was cross-platform, which I liked. So I could send a link to an iTunes person, an Apple person. But now I use Google Podcasts. I think it's fine. I don't know. And also, if you're going to start a podcast, my last word of advice is stick with it. It's going to take a while. If you're looking to make money immediately, this is not the platform for you. It's going to take a while. The industry standard is called the CPM rate, which stands for cost per thousand, and being the Roman numeral for 1,000. And the average is about $10 to $20, which sounds, low per thousand. But on YouTube, it's like $3. On Instagram, it's $1. On TikTok, I think it's under $1. So when you hear $10 compared to $1 for that same 100,000, let's say you had 100,000 listeners, that's a big difference, right?
Yeah.
And then when you say that there are, 100 million people on Instagram and only 1 million podcasts, then it doesn't seem so bad. Then those numbers seem much more manageable. So don't be frightened by them. If you're looking to make money in an entertainment form, right now I feel podcasting is your best option. If you're looking to make money, if you want to be seen and you want to just be on YouTube doing or TikTok doing dances, podcasting is not for you.
Yeah, and I echo that it takes a lot of time. I've been doing this since May, and I haven't quite monetize this one yet, but it's also not my full-time job. And so it takes a while, and everything takes kind of practice. You didn't start podcasting right out the gate. You had other experience. And so especially for people like me, where it's your first really foray into entertainment, it's going to take a little bit longer than maybe it takes somebody with more experience.
Right.
And so you got to keep trying.
For me, it was interesting because I had to go from speaking in 1 to 3 minute encapsulated one break, one thoughts, and how to tell a story in a minute and a half versus, I have an hour now. So I can tell that story in far more vivid detail. Or when I was interviewing people, like on my radio show, we interviewed every rock star you could think of, from Ozzy and, Black Sabbath and Guns N' Roses. Everybody could think of that was a major rock star. And back then I interviewed them. But it was a 5-minute interview. I didn't need to do any research. I knew enough about the guy. I know what's the name of the new album. What's the name of the new single? Okay, I know enough to do 5 minutes. But an hour is a different story. You have to really get into it. So I spend hours watching, listening. If they have a book, if they have a movie, if they have a TV show, I am watching, listening, or reading that before they come on. I watch old interviews. If they have a podcast, I listen to it. Like I just did with your shows, I told you, I always do that now, and I enjoy that process because it makes for a far better interview.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This one was great.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Career Journey Podcast. Head over to our website at careerjourneypodcast.com for more information and the latest episodes. See you next time.